Yes. Right.
necklace.
We're good. Okay, thanks for coming, everyone. Today is March 22nd, and this is the work session for our Cottonwood Heights City Council. We're going to actually go to number 3 on our agenda today and begin with our review of our business meeting agenda, and then we will come back to item number 2 after that. So the first item on our business meeting agenda tonight, first we're going to have our Finance Director, Scott Jurgis, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. Thanks, Scott. Next on our list will be citizen comment period. And then after that, we will go to our legislative action items. The first item we have to look at tonight is actually 4.1, consideration of resolution 2022-17, which is approving entry into the First Amendment to a consulting agreement with Horrocks Engineers, Inc. That is actually the first item we'll discuss under our staff reports with Mike. And so we'll come back to that. The second item on our list tonight is consideration of resolution 2022-18, which is declaring certain property surplus. And so we will have Scott tell us a little bit more about what we're looking at tonight.
So there's kind of 2 groups of items. One is a 2010 Chevrolet pickup truck that has been used in public works. That is getting older, has a lot of miles on it, and time to let that go.
Good time to sell used vehicles.
Yes, it actually is. And so that's that item. The other is a list of, it's actually 145 different items utilizing IT, anything from laptops to desktops to monitors to routers. Wireless access points, different things along those lines that are just older, obsolete. We're not using them, and we recommend that those get put out. We typically use an auction company to get rid of them, typically in lots, and that's the best way for us to let those items go. But those are the 2 kind of lists of items that we have for surplus right now.
Okay, great. Great. And then once those sell, do we get a report after?
We don't typically report back to you. We
Okay.
can. We typically just put the money back into a revenue account and then it goes back into our general fund.
Okay.
But we can definitely let you know what happens with that. So.
Okay. I don't know if there's any interest in that. I was just wondering if we reported back on that.
I did see the Harley on KSL. I was gonna leave a snide remark. But
Well, you can because it's sold, sir.
oh, it did sell? just in the last few days.
2 days ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
Friday.
You waited too long, Doug.
No, I wasn't looking at it. I sold my bike.
yeah, the Harley did, just for information, the Harley sold for $14,500 and we bought it for what, 17?
17.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
So, that's not bad.
Great residual.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, we kept the lights and sirens, so it's actually a wash.
Great. Okay, any questions from the council at all on that? If not, the next item on that we'll be looking at tonight under legislation is consideration of resolution 2022-19, which is approving entry into a service agreement with Air City Bounce for our 2022 Butlerville days that we are all looking forward to. Tim, I'll let our city manager, Tim Tingey, discuss that for us for a little bit.
Yeah, so this will include, the agreement includes 11 rides or / equipment elements. There's a listing of what they are. They will also provide individuals to be at those, trained attendants to assist with those. It's a flat fee of about a little over $6,700. We're recommending approval of the agreement. The committee the last year we provided these rides free of charge for individuals. The committee, the Butlerville Days Committee, was interested in continuing to do that, so we're going to move forward with that as well. So this is part of our budgeted items under our budget for Butlerville Days, and like I say, we're recommending approval.
Great, thanks, Tim. Any questions or comments? I actually really like that we're providing this free of charge. So,
They weren't able to used to do that, but
yeah,
it was very popular. And with the carnival coming back, I think it's a lot cheaper than it used to be, like $11,000
yeah.
to get the blow up ride. So
That'd be the only thing that's gone down in price in the last little while.
Well, I was there with my grandchildren and they loved every second of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that
marvelous.
we've missed the carnival portion, so great. Any other comments, questions? Okay. And then the last item that we will be considering tonight in the business meeting will be our consent calendar, which is approval of, you ready for this? So we'll be approving our city council retreat minutes of January 25th, our legislative work session minutes for both February 24th and March 3rd, and our work session CDRA meeting and business meeting minutes for March 1st. So that'll be a lot of word jungles we'll go through for a little bit. Okay, are we ready?
Ready.
Okay, great. So our next item that we'll be discussing today is we've invited Utopia Fiber to come and give us a presentation. We have Roger Timmerman with us, who is the executive director and CEO, is that right, of Utopia Fiber? And we're excited to have him give us a presentation on what you all offer. So.
Right. Well, thanks for having me here. Thanks for not throwing me out. I'm not Kim. As you see on the agenda, Kim was planning to be here. They have to put up with me instead. She had a urgent thing come up, so wasn't able to come. We were both planning to come. It's more fun with her, but we'll have to have her in a follow-up meeting. Anyways, Utopia Fiber, I wanted to kind of introduce you to that and what we're doing and how that might work as in partnership with the city, if you're interested in that. I'm going to go through some slides here, so I'm going to share that. Just a second here. That working? Perfect. Okay. And we're on screen here. So, okay. First, I think it's important to understand who we are. You know, we're not a business. I think that's the first thing to understand. We're not here selling you anything. We are a consortium of cities. We're an interlocal entity by the Utah Code definitions. And it's multiple cities. We have the original founding cities that created Utopia, and it stayed that way for a while. It wasn't the best thing to be part of in the early years. There were some difficult times, but about 2009, things turned around and we've had a lot of success. And we basically allowed new cities to come in and just participate in the success. And we've added a lot of cities. And so all these cities at the bottom, not all of them are even in Utah. We got Idaho Falls on here and Bozeman, Montana, are projects that we're building out and operating. But most of those are Utah cities, and we're talking to several other cities. The network generally spans kind of the Wasatch Front. We have 19 fiber to the home projects that are citywide, but we offer cities in over 50 cities, including Cottonwood Heights. We have some customers in the city now. But it's mostly the stuff that's close to Midvale, just because it was like, well, they're just right over there. We'll build to them and offer services there. But there's very limited coverage in the city. So I wouldn't consider it like we're here. We're just barely here. Historically, I've got this, the colors are chosen on purpose here. The red years were kind of the rough years. And then 2009, approximately, we kind of turned things around, and everything we've done since 2009 has been successful. Now, what does that mean? Successful, financially successful. So the first part, we could say, was successful in the sense there was good services and investment and good, broadband, but financially, those projects didn't hit the targets they'd hoped to, and it left the cost on the cities that participated. But since 2009, we've bonded for 400 million plus of projects, and all of those projects are paying for themselves from voluntary subscription revenues. There's no cost to those cities. People sign up, they pay for the service, and that's enough money that the whole thing pays for itself. And I got 460 million on this sheet because there's some that we didn't bond for. So the ones that we own the debt, hold the debt, it's about 400 million. But Bozeman is actually $65 million project. Idaho Falls is their own. We've got different structures, but most of them UIA, which is kind of the phase 2 entity, finances those in behalf of the city. We issue the debt, we pay off the debt. We do the public hearings and all the fun stuff that cities don't like to do when it comes to issuing debt. So that there would actually be no city debt if you partnered with us. This is a criticism we get a lot of times. Some people are like, here it is, government getting into stuff they shouldn't be getting into. Is this some sort of an overreach? Is this anti-competitive? But actually it's not. And I'll explain why. But really we're pro-competition, we're pro-private sector. What we do enables the private companies to come to your city and offer services and compete with each other. There are a couple incumbents that don't like competition, so you'll hear them complain, but all of the largest Utah-based providers want to come to your city and offer services, and they aren't in your city now. And they would like to, but they need the fiber that we build to be able to do that. So that we actually, for everyone that doesn't like this, we bring in about 5 to 10 that would say, we want this. Allows us to come here and offer broadband.
Who are those?
So like X-Mission is they're the oldest ISP in Utah and pretty big. Veracity, First Digital, Centricom, there's a bunch of them. We're used to doing open access, what we call open access and other infrastructure. So we build open access roads. And what I mean by that is we put a road in and anybody can use that road. So this picture shows FedEx, UPS, and the Postal Service all competing with each other on public infrastructure. Another example would be airports. You build an airport and all these different airlines come in and they compete with each other, and some succeed and some fail. But none of them would be able to come in and offer services if we didn't have that public infrastructure there for them to use. That's the way we treat fiber. So we build fiber, but you don't get service from us. We put it in and we let any company, but these are ones we have on right now. These companies then write across that fiber to offer services. But it's also an anchor service for the city itself. So we are cities and we sit down with cities and say, what do you need? Let's get every single one of your facilities hooked up on your own private dedicated network. We implement various smart city applications. So you're kind of an anchor tenant to your own system, but also it's great for the private companies to come in and use as well. This is a comparison. This is probably too much detail to go in, but let me hit a couple points here. The left column is where you'd say, we're just going to be the internet provider as a city. We're going to build our own fiber and offer it to our residents. There's some problems. I mean, it's kind of anti-competitive. It's difficult in Utah. It's not strictly prohibited, but it practically is. It's very, very difficult to navigate the laws that allow that. It basically replaces a private sector monopoly with a public sector monopoly. I mean, we don't like that. You know, we're not in this business to drive out the private providers. We're in it to enable them. So if you flip over to the right column, this would be like a Google Fiber or CenturyLink Fiber or something like that, where it's like, well, this is good because it's a newer service and may offer new option, but it's just one new option. But there's no way to, in fact, legally, you can't obligate them to cover the whole city, nor can you obligate them to any sort of timeline. It results in a new fiber monopoly. Once they come in, they're the only ones. That's both from a market competition perspective and also the method they build. You can't microtrench two systems in the same city, and they do microtension. We don't. We can get into that if you want to talk about that, but it is an anti-competitive method of construction of fiber. And then they have all sorts of problems, and whether it's them or any of these other private fiber providers, you have issues with net neutrality violations, consumer privacy. You know, all those things are not allowed on our public infrastructure. So we ensure consumer privacy is protected and net neutrality things. So we're in the middle column there. So it's kind of the best of both. We guarantee coverage. We enable lots of private competitor options. There's a couple oranges on there. It's lightly regulated. We do have some issues we have to comply with, but it's not nearly as bad as being the internet provider. It's also difficult to achieve an economy of scale. Now that's generally applied. If a city decided they want to do open access by themselves, you're sharing margins and revenues with a private provider, and that's hard to pay your bills with that model. But we have economy of scale. Utopia does, because we have the 19 city projects. And incrementally for us to add a city, we avoid that. So conceptually, that's a difficult thing, but we've overcome that. Now we have about 45,000 subscribers. Okay, and we can talk about construction. I'm going to skip through that, but if you want to go into, or maybe you're interested.
No,
in that
yeah,
one. Okay.
yeah. We
All right.
do want,
So
Just-
we
can
build
I ask
this
just real quick, how many homes have you passed?
about 140,000.
And you got 45,000. Okay.
All right. We do what we consider to be utility city grade infrastructure. It is the best quality. It's hardened. It's the best way to build it. It's the minimal impact to the roads. These are all the pluses here. It's in the public utility easement. It's where it should be. It's the best way to do it. And the negatives would be, well, it is more expensive and it's slower. It's horizontal directional drilling when we're underground. There'll be some aerial attachments where you have existing utilities, but we wouldn't be putting in a single pole. We wouldn't be, and the cables are actually really small. So where there's aerial, there's minimal impact, and where it's underground, it's directional drilled rather than trenched, and it's not in the street except for where we cross. But even then, it doesn't impact the surface except for when there's a crossing. There's a little core they have to dig out.
Is that done with the torpedoes?
So we use what's considered a horizontal directional drill for the mainline construction, and then for the installations, it's a missile bore. So it's a smaller pneumatic thing that kind of vibrates under the ground.
How deep do you usually tend to go with that?
It's between 2 and 3 feet is where it's targeted to be on mainline, and it's like 1 to 2 feet on the install. It's meant to stay below sprinkler lines for the house, and then a little deeper on the main line. That'd be along the curbs, or just behind curb. Micro trenching, I got all sorts of problems with micro trenching. I can take you on a tour and show you how awful it is. Cities don't like it generally. I don't know why they allow it. A lot of cities don't allow it. It's experimental, and it tears up your roads. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I could show you lots of examples of like what a disaster that has been. It's some companies are like, we like to do this. It's great and acceptable, but that's up for debate. It's not really been used for very long. It's cheaper and faster for the provider. I mean, in no way is it better for a city though. Like it is absolutely worse for a city. Then you look at us and say, well, who are we? We are cities. We want this built the very best. And even if that comes at a little bit of a premium, it's not terribly more expensive. It's a little more expensive and a little slower, but it's the best long-term way to do it. And we stick to that. All of our projects are traditional build. So does that answer your concerns on micro trenching? Or I got slides and pictures and other stuff, but
You don't have to
We get through
convince
this.
us of micro trenching being a problem. You're
Okay.
preaching to the choir right now.
Okay. You wouldn't be the only city that's like, no way, we don't want that in our cities.
But you're the first guy said that it's kind of an exclusive. Once you've done it, only one provider can be doing it.
Yeah, so one
So you can't
provider
go down
comes
one side and
in.
The other.
Yeah, one company comes in and does it, and the next company walks in and says, oh, we also want a micro trench. You can't, because their micro trench would cut the other micro trench, right? You can't cross
Somewhere.
micro trenches because it's saw cut right into the road. So it doesn't work.
I mean, that makes sense. I just haven't considered that.
So once you let somebody do it, I mean, we don't think you should let anybody do it, but if you do let someone do it, they'll be the only ones who can ever do it. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
Yep.
Many people share these lines when they go through. Is this one not shareable?
Like what we would build?
Right, there's when you have open trench and things like that, this is different. I don't think we can open trench very many places here in the city. But I know that when you do have an open trench agreement, you can put multiple lines through there with a buffer. And so once you're in there, and if another provider came in, they'd have to be so far away from what you've done. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, our system is open in the sense that any company can lease our fiber strands or connections across our network at the same terms and rates. So it's meant to avoid multiple companies having to put their stuff in.
So they would lease from you for a fee?
Yeah.
That's what I meant by shareable.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is the case then.
Uh-huh.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of this, when cities designed this model was, let's just get it all in and no one will, I mean, somebody might say, I want to come in and build it again. And be like, why? Our rates are so low and it's there and we built capacity to support any company that wants to do it and everybody can use it. And that's the case. Once we build fiber in a city, we've never seen anyone else come in and overbuild this because they're like, why would I spend all that money when I can just get fiber and connectivity from Utopia? I mean, we sell and lease fiber to our competitors. Almost every wireless company in the state uses us. You'd be like, that's not even fiber, but it's there in the ground. We're like, you want to use it? Anybody can use it. So we don't protect ourselves from that. It's just available.
So competition still continues with yours. And so that's very,
But they don't have to come in and overbuild us
right.
to get their connectivity.
Why do it? It's their infrastructure. They lease it from you for a certain amount and then they run theirs, right?
So I want to do full disclosure, sorry, Sean, then I'll go to you real quick. We are going to do the same process with Google Fiber. We've invited CenturyLink. So we're going to work, so they're going to be able to come in and explain their processes as well. So that before we decide or make it.
Has Google gone away from micro trenching?
Not that I know. No, sorry, Sean, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask about capacity. I know right now you have a certain number of users that are attaching to your fiber. How often and how much capacity is there to mitigate having to go back and retrench and set new fiber?
It sounds a little silly, but infinite capacity. The way we design our fiber network puts a dedicated fiber strand from every house back to our fiber huts. Google and others do what's called a GPON network, where they use splitters, and it's like a cable network where the whole neighborhood shares a fiber connection. So there is a limited capacity.
That's why I asked the question.
Ours, again, we're like, this is carrier grade, utility, city grade, whatever we want to call that. We ensure that everybody has their own dedicated fiber, not just some service they sign up for, but it really is their own fiber from their house all the way back to our huts. And none of the other options do it that way, whether it's CenturyLink or Google or anyone else. It's fiber, but it's built like a cable shared network.
The thing that would cause additional build out would be significantly more addresses to pass or a new fiber hut.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a new development come in and we said, oh crud, well, we only planned so many strands.
I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if you had someone come in with 10,000 houses, that would probably cost.
Yeah, that'd be a problem. We'd have to, I mean, we just trench in a new cable or bore in. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word trench. We don't trench. We'd bore in a new cable if we had to. Usually we have capacity in the conduit to pull another cable through it. But there've been some cases where some new development shows up in the middle of an area we already built, and then we have to come in and put in a new.
I don't think we have that
conduit.
much.
No, you're pretty much built out from what I could tell.
Is it pretty close to a gig then?
So every single address in our networks is 10 gig capable when we finish the build, and most sign up for gig and they can get that unlimited gig, but we over engineer it so that day one, and this is the case on the 140,000 addresses, every single one of those can get 10 gigabit today, which is 10 times faster than anyone else. I guess maybe Google has a 2 gig option now, but we're 10 gig today. So we're a full generation ahead. And you say, well, why are you able to do that and others not? Well, because we have a dedicated fiber to every house. If we went out into the neighborhood and then split that across 30 or 60 homes, then suddenly we're not able to offer the same capacity. That's why you see the other carriers offering a slower speed, because it's shared.
Are you able to talk to the price to consumer? Is it too early for that, Ken?
Yeah, you'd have the same price structures as all of our cities. We standardize on that. So it's $65 all in, and I say all in because there's a couple different charges that add up to that. We charge $30 and the service provider charges $35. So it's an all-in cost of $65 a month for a 250 megabit connection, or it's about $78, $75, depending on which provider you pick, for a full gigabit connection. And then the 10 gig is about $200. That used to be something people were like, haha, 10 gig, that's ridiculous. and $200 is out of question. But we're actually seeing more and more people signing up for that, whether, I don't know why, they're maybe power users or bragging rights. Or in some cases, it's their businesses say, well, we'll reimburse your internet costs up to some amount. And they're like, well, I might as well get the best if the company's paying for it. So whatever that reason is, we're seeing gigabit is actually the most popular. Like, it's not the $65, it's the $78-ish package is the one that most people are signing up for. But more and more are getting to that.
And the gigabyte relates to speed. It doesn't relate to data, right? So do you have data caps?
No data caps, it's all unlimited.
Okay.
And one of the big points is it never slows down. And all these other networks where they're shared, it's like, yeah, this is fantastic at 3 a.m, but 10 o'clock p.m. is the peak for residential users. That's when everybody is using it. They're streaming, they're browsing, they're gaming, or whatever. And ours are 100% speeds at that time. And that's again, how we design
Going
these
to bed,
networks.
movie watching surpass middle of the day corporate use.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Residential use exceeds our business use. So in aggregate of all the stuff we have, it goes up in the morning when people are working, and it stays kind of flat during the day. And then in the evenings, it goes up to its highest levels.
So it's your fiber. Do you have plans to go direct to consumer, or will you always?
No, there's a section in the Utah code that basically says if you go direct to consumer as a public entity, you have to do a million things to make it impossible to like function. It's nearly impossible to finance the projects and operate it, whatever. But if you run it as a wholesale system or open access basis like we do, then none of that chapter of code applies. And so we are largely unregulated because we don't offer retail service.
Would the city have any say about which end provider would come in, or would that just be between you?
We have to keep it neutral, and basically we have 16 different providers that come in and compete on the system.
And the reason I asked that, I've heard of some of them I've heard not so good things, and others better things. But anyway, yeah.
Well, yeah, I would say, yeah, that's on the customer service end of them, but if you have another one that you can go to, it's better customer service.
Well,
can-
would we have multiple options?
Yeah, every customer
Everyone
can
would-
pick from
Oh,
this
got it.
menu.
Okay.
So this isn't if I really hate A, well, I can't go to B because they're not here yet
Got
or
it.
whatever. I mean, it's like, well, I'm on A, I like everything except that, you know, I didn't like the way so-and-so treated me, so I'm gonna go from Brigham.net to Xmission, or I don't like Xmission, so I'm gonna go to FiberNet, or I'm gonna, right, you know, whatever the.
Yeah, and it's important to note there are no contracts. Okay, I mean, you sign up for service and there's contract language as far as usage and stuff, but you don't have a term.
Okay.
So you sign up for 1 month, and if you don't like it, you cancel or you switch to a different provider. So there's no installation cost, and it's just month to month from day one with all of our providers anywhere in any of our city projects.
So when you talk about $65 a month versus 78 and the higher usage, so depending what provider a given resident chooses, it averages $78.
Yeah, so it's hard to see on this slide, but so we charge $30 a month, and I'll explain what that's for in a second. But then you pick from these different companies, and they have different prices for 250 meg, gigabit, or 10 gig, and they vary. You know, some of them are kind of a premium brand, and they can charge a few dollars more and still get customers. And some of them are like, nobody knows who we are, so we're going to try to get more customers by on price or with some bundle of phone and video. Hardly anybody's doing video and phone anymore. They just use like Fubo, their jazz fan. If they're not, then it's usually YouTube TV. But those have become really popular streaming options. And so your total cost, you know, I had little squigglies on the right there because it varies by a few dollars based on which provider you pick. But that's about what you're looking at from a competitive perspective. And we haven't raised rates in over 10 years. So we don't plan to either. The providers could, but we haven't needed to on our side, on the wholesale side. And the competitive marketplace has kind of kept them all honest and aggressive.
Where are you at now? I know in my area, there's only about 18 homes down there, and that would not be the low hanging fruit for you. because nobody else has come down there because it's not the mass use as far as number of homes and that. I mean, where's your infrastructure right now? Where does it go?
I mean, every address in Midvale is covered, so we kind of have your west.
So your west,
border.
right?
And we got a couple of lines that come in for some of the businesses and things we've picked up there. The design, I'm going to flip forward a little here. These are full designs we've done of the whole city. Like, this isn't us just like conceptually, this is the way it is. We actually have designed your whole city. We know every foot, every box, every connection that would go in, and what it would cost to do it, and how long it would take us. And I've got the details of what that models out to
Is
be.
that a recent one or is that?
Oh yeah, we just refreshed it. We had done it like 2 years ago. We came and met, and
15 years ago.
well, yeah. So it's been updated. And so we have 6 footprints, and each of these comes back to one of those fiber huts. And then they have a ring and a backbone that would interconnect those and come in multiple locations to our existing backbones in Murray and Midvale.
Where do the fiber huts go?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Where?
Because we have a little to do about one.
Yeah, I heard some other provider. Usually we can get them in at parks and schools and city property.
Facilities.
But it's always, we go in there and say, pretty please. And if you can't, then how about this location, or how about this? Ours are much smaller than that one you were dealing with. Ours are 10 by 12 walk-in shelters. So they're not cabinets, they're still walk-in, but 10 by 12 is a lot smaller than what some other company deals with. Yeah.
XYZ.
They do have generator and air conditioners on them. We use about the quietest generator you can find. We're very conscious about the surrounding neighborhood and the impacts, but we can show you where we've done them, and the city has been very pleased with where they've gone and how our installations have gone.
About outages, any statistics on those?
Yeah, we guarantee basically 4 nines for residential of reliability, if you know what that is, 99.99% of the time. And then for businesses, it's 5 nines. We do much better than that. Our facilities, we consider them critical infrastructure. I mean, broadband didn't used to be this way, but if you don't have your broadband now, you're panicking, and it's almost an addiction. But we also support critical city services, right? Police stations, fire, city buildings, emergency response type things. And so all of our facilities are on battery backup and generators. So we can run indefinitely without power. That's a difference that other providers don't do, because they use cabinets, battery backed up cabinets that can only survive about 4 hours in the field. That's not the case with Google. This isn't us versus them, but there's a lot of different companies out there. But your cable company and DSL and other fiber companies even often will just use the battery backups, and it all dies after a few hours. So that'll happen to most residential customers unless they buy their own battery backups and things. But obviously it's important that we at least keep our stuff up, so that if it's in a critical location, so long as they have generators and battery, they can stay up indefinitely on our service and keep them running.
Because my question or concern would be the errant driver getting to a Google hut, or not a Google, a fiber hut.
Yeah, we've actually never had one of our huts. I mean, our huts are larger
That would
facilities.
be last summer, there was a backhoe incident in the backyard that cut providers' lines.
Yeah, so the lines will get hit, but the huts we've never had one get knocked out by a
Something
vehicle.
like that's fair. I was gonna ask, so is there redundancy in the system?
So the ring between all the huts is a ring in the sense that we can take any cut along any of our rings and backbones, and everything stays up and running. But the final last mile from a fiber hut to the house is not
It's
redundant.
not, okay.
So the maximum outage would be for about 1,500 locations, which would be about 500 to 600 customers. We do run 24/7 though. We have a 24/7 network operations center just over here in Murray, just up past the Wheeler farm.
Much closer.
And we have 24/7 technicians that run out and diagnose and repair. And if it's a huge repair, then we have immediate response on contract with some of the contractors, the construction contractors that'll come out and fix things. So basically guarantee a 1 hour response and 4 hour resolution on the system. And that applies to like the city itself, any businesses and critical connections. And then residential, we guarantee that 4 nines, which is generally next day resolution. But if it's any group of residential customers, it's immediate response and quick resolution. But an individual issue is usually it's the next day type of thing, which is still really good.
So it's from west to east. So the last people to get access to this, would they be the
Not
farthest
necessarily.
No.
I mean, for all the size of projects we do in the Meta Cruz we have, we would basically start the whole city in parallel, and then based on the timing of things coming out of our engineering firms and permitting, we would likely be starting a couple like all over the place and do them in parallel. And it would just be kind of the progress of the construction that would dictate completion and release of services in those areas. But I don't see it going west to east. It would be kind of a lot in parallel.
Question I would have, and maybe this is a super basic question, but perhaps for those of us in the room that would like to understand the progression. So like right now, personally, I have CenturyLink that comes into my house. I pay $45 a month. It meets the needs of my household in the way of, broadband. So when I look at, looking ahead to $68, $78 a month, I mean, for people on fixed income, I think that could be very significant. So what will happen? The question is, what will happen to the CenturyLink companies and those kind of providers that are currently providing to I don't know what number of residents in Cottonwood Heights, but I know I'm one of them. How will the progression work? Will they still be in business in 5 years from now? Or
so CenturyLink's got much bigger problems than Utopia. CenturyLink is getting decimated by Comcast. I mean, I would be surprised if they are offering residential services in a few years. And that's not because of us.
Why is that? If you don't mind explaining.
Because for most users, they don't have a service that meets those requirements, right? If you look at CenturyLink's quarterly reports and their customer counts, they're just going in the toilet, and Comcast is skyrocketing. And that's because those CenturyLink customers are moving to Comcast. And that's, across such a big part of the country.
Because people are doing such a high amount of streaming, like
they just want more speed. I mean, it used to be what's the cheapest service, and now it's like even on our system, most of our customers aren't even going with our 65. They're choosing to up to the $78 service because to them it's worth a little bit more money even to get that gigabit tier. Now we are not planning on 100% of the residents getting the service.
The existing providers will still be around.
Oh yeah,
as long as their market.
There's still a place for low cost providers outside of Utopia, right? Like we're not going to do anything I'd say that there's still going to be people who want that $30 to $40 package and they'll stay on that. But historically, like over the last few years, especially with COVID, we saw people leaving that in droves.
There's some people who stay on landlines.
It used to just be one person at home during the day, and now it was like, school and work and, there's just, so there's a place for it still. We don't interfere with that. But overall, we see far more people migrating to the more premium broadband options.
Well, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place to get into this right now during this presentation, but when I attended, on behalf of the council, I attend the AMC, the Association of Municipal Councils, and we had presentations, but regarding not only fiber, because this is an issue going on for so many cities around Salt Lake County. So for all of us at the table in February, one of the takeaways for me was the importance of a plan related to not strictly laying fiber network, but kind of how we conceive that the city may want to operate in future years related to, for instance, AI. One of the examples that was given, I'm pointing over at Chief Russo, because they pointed out that the city coming up with a plan for how we're going to use not only fiber, but also, again, monitoring our parks. It can be a help to our police department, to I'm just looking at my notes. They give a number of examples of this importance of seeing the future, not strictly about laying fiber lines. Anyways,
Yeah.
someone at the table said, well, Harriman just formed a committee and they are making plans for what Harriman will look like, out over the next, 10 and 20 years. So I'm just wondering if either Utopia or whether we'll look at
I think it's a
something like
really
that.
important point. And one of the things that relates to that is the contractual terms. And I don't know if Roger, you'd planned on going into that at all?
Yep.
Because that would determine
let me-
some of what you're talking about.
Yeah, let me hit on some of your points really quickly. So we are, I would say confidently, we are the #1 deployer of smart city applications. That wasn't what we were created for, but we're like, that's one of the top reasons why you would do this. And so some cities are like, yeah, I want better broadband in my homes, but I also need services for my own city. There are several cities that haven't partnered with us for fiber to the home that do partner with us for smart city. So Bountiful City, for example, all their city facilities are on our fiber network, but they're not a fiber to the home project. Farmington City is the same thing. Syracuse was the same thing, but then they decided to do fiber to the home with us. So we'd love to work with you on smart city applications, getting your facilities hooked up. This is a list of different applications that we've worked on. But I'm just going to show up a couple examples. One of them is air quality sensors. You can pretty much pick out what cities are Utopia fiber cities by how many air quality sensors they have. So this is an example. If you look at the valley, you see the West Valley City, Midvale, and Murray have more air quality sensors than these other cities and across the valley. And then in Utah County, it's more obvious because we deploy those sensors. Every single one of our fiber huts, that's just part of it. We put on an air quality sensor. And so we would include that for free in this project because that's just part of what we do. Another thing we do is this is a wildfire detection system. We worked with a team at BYU to develop a thermal camera system that pans over high risk areas. And it does a live monitoring of these video feeds. Oh, that was a video on one of my other slides. But anyways, they're monitoring these areas continuously, and then we have a Slack channel that notifies us when there's detected fires, and we have both histogram analysis and artificial intelligence analysis of that to determine if there's a potential risk. We think might be a fire, and we get some false positives here and there, like when the sun goes by. It's a work in progress, but we have these deployed in Woodland Hills, Layton, Murray, several cities. And that was something I wanted to bring up here. I'm like, if you guys wanted one of those as part of the deployment, we can add that in. You are a city that would benefit from one of these cameras looking at your area. The Murray one may actually be covering your area right now. You can pull it up if you want to edwinproject.org if you want to poke around. But the feeds are right on there, and we make them publicly available. But we have first responders that jump on there, and they're like, usually it's been like somebody reported a fire, and they'll just pull up and say, no, it's not a fire, it's a car up on the bench or something like that. So we've had more cases of just eliminated false positives. Unfortunately, maybe I should say, fortunately, we haven't had a lot of wildfires in the view of the camera yet, or cameras, which is a good thing, I guess. But we kind of want to see some so we can see how well it works in a real fire. So anyway,
sounds like staying on top of technology is a priority then.
Yeah, and there's a ton of these sorts of things that benefit. You're like the main thing these things need is connectivity, and that connectivity comes with these projects. We do charge the city a nominal fee for the connectivity. Just there's some Utah laws that don't let us cross subsidize, but essentially you get a really, really good rate for your connectivity, and 100% of that goes towards the guarantee on this project, which I need to get into, and that's the financial model.
Yeah, that's it.
So let me talk about that really quick. So what's the catch, right? Remember, we are a consortium of cities that build fiber networks. When a city wants to do a fiber network with us, we say, well, this is great. You can piggyback off of what we're doing, but you need to have a guarantee on your incremental project. You're not going to have to guarantee anything that's been done in the past or anything outside of your city, but the cost and the revenue model tied to your project requires a guarantee, a partnership guarantee with the city. You say, oh, this is scary. What does that mean? This sounds terrible. Okay. So we do everything on the left column there, which is basically turnkey, build it, manage it, maintain it. but we'll have a services agreement between the city and UIA that basically says we need 40% of the people to sign up to have revenues so that this thing pays for itself. That's our generic kind of template. Now, when we came in and designed this project, I'm going to skip forward to this one. We actually came in lower than that. I was surprised because we do have some higher cost areas. It's rocky here, but there were some pockets that had aerial poles, and we're like, well, it's not a lot of the city, but it does save us some cost. And overall, we came out with about a $27.9 million project cost covering 14,200 locations, both business and commercial and other, maybe it's a cell tower, maybe it's just something that could sign up for service. So that may not match perfectly with your utilities, but it's probably sort of close. When we go to finance that comes out to $142,000 monthly expense. If you just subtract that or divide that by the $30 a month fee that we charge, we need 4,743 people to sign up. That comes out to about 33%, which is great. When we look at these and say we're 45 to 50, we start getting a little bit nervous. We wouldn't have any problem getting 33%. I mean, we look at this and say this is a slam dunk. And I could show you the numbers from Alpine. We met with them recently. It was like, sorry, your houses are really spread apart. We need 60% plus. That we don't have the same level of confidence in. And so we're looking that they would have to come in with cash up front to subsidize that to get it into a more achievable. Your project does not need any subsidy, but it does require a contract that says that if we didn't get $142,000 a month in revenues from customers, let's say we got 120,000, you would loan us the difference. I say loan because once we got enough customers, then we'd pay you back. In the worst case scenario, we pay you back at the end of the term of the financing, but that we've never had to do that. So let me show you. Oh, these are our take rates.
May I just add, or ask what, and maybe you're going to mention this. So what is the term of the loan?
So it's a 25-year payment period, but the term of the contract is 27 years. And the reason is because we do 2 years of capitalized interest up front to give us time to build it and market it and grow revenues. So let me show you this charted out. So on your own, it would look like this, where you've got to get revenues up to that 2 years. We're like, this is really scary for a city to take on its own. Because of our reduced costs, you're just kind of piggybacking off of $400 million of infrastructure that's already been done. We avoid a lot of cost. And so in partnership with us, that threshold is much lower. This is a generic model, just kind of showing how this flows. So any revenue in the beginning accumulates and acts as a buffer. So this is a break-even scenario where we actually have about 3.5 years to get to the target take rate before there'd be any exposure to the city, even though we don't have revenue sufficient to cover the debt until that time. But that buffer, that first 2 years acts as a buffer. When we model, this is specific to Cottonwood Heights, this slide. So this one, we modeled it out. It's like, hey, actually, we expect to be up here, 40+% take rate, but actually I had this on an old model at 38%, or actually at 33%. So the numbers aren't going to add up exactly on this chart, but conceptually, we would have similarly about 3.5 years to get to that target take rate because of that buffer period in the beginning. When I show what have we done in other ones, this was Layton City, and that break-even scenario is in light lines on this. And then when we actually financed it and then built it, the green line is the actuals. And we were way ahead of where we needed to be on that. Successful. There's no cost to Layton on that project. This was Payson. We blew way past it. This was Morgan. We're at more than double what we needed in that city. That one was easy. There's no Comcast there. West Point, another successful one. We have more revenues we need. These didn't even need the buffer. I mean, we have that 2-year buffer period, but none of these have ever needed it. Clearfield's the most recent one. We haven't hit the target yet, but we're trending ahead of where we need to be. So we consider that very successful. And if we take all of them, over 400 million of these in aggregate, all of these since 2009 have just blown it out of the water and been successful with no cost back to the city. And they all were kind of similar scenario, about in that 33 to 35% take rate where they needed to be, some a little higher and some lower. But, again, I'd be like, yeah, you plug in, you look just like these other ones. We do similarly well. If you came in with, oh, crud, this is going to be a 60% or 70%, I'd be worried. But we're not having any problem hitting that 33-34% take rate here so that there's no exposure to the city.
I have a couple of.
Yep.
Yes.
So as far as if a determination was made or an agreement was signed, how long would it take you to build out? Because you have a number of other cities that are not built out yet. What's the length of time that it would take to get the city built out? That's my first question. I have a second question, but I'll let you.
2 years. So we'll probably do it faster than that, but we would commit 2 years,
Is that to every address?
every address.
I'm asking that for the people who live on very nice quaint lanes that don't
Yeah.
really have.
Like Doug.
We
I wasn't gonna say
we can
that.
show you our maps.
I
and
know
stuff.
where you live, Scott.
I mean,
I don't live on a quaint lane and I have internet.
Layton City had some of these roads that switch back to way up the side of the mountain. And I mean, we built all the way up these nasty little roads that went way off. I mean, we commit to every address in the city. Be done in 2 years.
So I have a follow-up. Well, anyway, this is a, it's our job as a council to ask hard questions. So this is a little bit of a harder one, maybe. So my concern with a 25 or 27-year term, with the rapid pace of technology changing, in 12 to 15 years, there's a brand new technology that everybody wants. And because we're in a term, we would have a hard time changing. So, I'm sure you've been asked that question before. So
Every time, every meeting.
every meeting.
Is it Skylink? Is that one of the things?
Yeah, satellite is
Right,
obviously
right,
one,
right.
Yeah.
and Wi-Fi and things that wouldn't. Anyway, tell us what you think.
So, I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball like everybody else. I'd probably use it to gamble instead, but I shouldn't say that. That's a joke. But this is probably one of the, this is a very, very reliable investment. And what I mean by that is we've been building these networks since 2002, so when Utopia started, right? So we're 20 years in, and over that entire period, we've received that question, right? Well, 4G is going to make this all obsolete. Oh, well, LTE is going to make this all obsolete. Well, 5G is going to make this all obsolete. Oh, well, Starlink is going to make, there's been all these different technologies and advancement, and they have improved dramatically. During that entire time frame, though, consumer demand and business demand for broadband has exceeded all of those. And so demand for fiber-based broadband has only increased consistently despite all of those different things and advancements, and it's been consistent for the whole 20 years. And then you say, okay, well, what about the next 20 years? Is it going to follow? And it's like 5G ain't it. It's just is not delivering. It has the same problems that 4G and everything else had, is that this whole area of 1,000 devices aggregated back to a single tower, shared, just the propagation of the signals, the sharing of the signals, it just doesn't work for home service. Works great for your handheld device. But when you put 50 devices at your house, maybe 30, depending on your house and how many kids you have and all the stuff.
How many teenagers do you have?
I have 4, and actually,
realistic.
I'm kind of a nerd and I actually counted them up, and I have about 150 devices connected to my home network. But the average has gone from about 8, like 5 years ago, to 40. And so we see this dramatic increase between smart TVs, gaming consoles, iPads, phones, laptops,
Alexa,
your thermostat, Alexa. I mean, if you sit down and think about how many devices you have connected now, and my refrigerator has a Wi-Fi connection. I don't know why, but it does. But that's the trends that we see. And then from a usage perspective, things like virtual reality streaming use far more bandwidth than even 4K video and some of these other things do. So there's these developing technologies we don't even have yet that just won't even work unless you have fiber. So the current trend looks fantastic. The historical trend favors this very strongly. And the stuff that the best crystal balls that people have show that the only infrastructure that really can hit the need 10 years from now would be fiber. So I can't,
Can we sign a 10-year contract?
well, we could finance it for 10 years, but then we'd have to have like 60% take rate right now. And
Well,
so,
but let's be realistic. Fiber has been the backbone. He's talked about 4G, 5G.
LTE.
Every single one of those gets to the tower. And what does the tower do? It goes to a piece of fiber. Okay, every single one of the wireless ones that's out, that doesn't matter where it is, your cell phones for decades and decades, every single one of them latches to a piece of fiber that's in the ground. And those, a lot of those fibers are, used to be phone fibers, where they've been there for decades. They just keep upgrading the lasers on the end to increase the capacity. So at some point, the fiber infrastructure is about the only thing that's supporting all of the other stuff, whether there may be something that comes out better for your individual house or something that, who knows, but everybody wants to get to Wi-Fi. But your Wi-Fi hooks to your fiber or your coax or your twisted pair with whoever your provider is.
I've got a question. You came to us and I wasn't here when you had a proposal. How many years ago was that then?
It's been
Oh,
about
wow.
four, I
Right,
was before me, right before.
So
me.
4.5 years or so. What has changed in the bonding that kind of made us flinch, more than flinch, from then to now? And maybe I could present that to Tim. Tim and I, we talked about it way back and said, what's the fear about that? Because we all want speed, you know what I mean? We have the need for speed. But what can we do? What has changed other than maybe the demand? And is your structure that we're locked into for 27 years is a long time.
yeah, I think the track record is much stronger today. You know, we didn't have a lot of new city partnerships when we talked before. It was the original cities and it was like, well, we have a couple of these new partnerships. Now I can show you we've been repeating this and adding new cities and every single one of them has been successful. So there's that. Also, the financing terms are fantastic right now. I mean, you know, knock on wood, they're going up, right? We've all heard interest rates are going up. I don't want to be like, hey, you need to do this right now, but you kind of need to do this right now. If interest rates go up, you know, 0.5%, that it dramatically impacts this because it's just we just plug it in, right? If we're not going to get, you know, 3% interest on this bond, we're going to get, you know, 3.1, 3.2, something like that. That goes right into how many subscriptions we need and what that risk of exposure to the city is. We're in pretty good territory right now. We're pricing 2 bonds this Wednesday and expect to do pretty well. But the trend is not good, and, you know, and so it's the sooner the
Just to
better.
clarify, you're obtaining the bond, and so we're not actually doing any bonding, we're just in a contract
So
willing to.
yeah,
cover costs.
it's softer than a bond, but it's still a 27-year commitment. And so what it is basically you're signing an agreement that says, we're going to pledge a revenue, you know, identify some revenue that we have at the city. The most popular thing lately has been using energy franchise revenues, so power and gas. Basically say, because most cities never touch those or use them for bonding. So it's a capacity they have that doesn't really prevent them from doing any other type of project they may want to do. So they pledge that revenue and say, if in the event there's a shortfall, we guarantee that we'll pay on that shortfall. It doesn't mean you actually raise rates or taxes or anything like that. It just means that's a guarantee that's used for financing purposes that gets us into that A+ type rating instead of an unrated bond or something like that if we were just going out as a business venture. So that guarantee is required. It's kind of it's used for getting the good rate, but it's also kind of what the other cities expect of a new city partnership. But you're not actually holding that debt. You're not paying on it. You're not, you know, it's a disclosure on your financial statements, but it's not debt. And if it does end up costing you, you know,
It's
what happened
contingent,
here,
it's
but
contingent, yeah.
you know, you get paid back
Yeah.
when there's revenue sufficient. Is that? Oh, that's a Windows computer. That's not me. That's not my alert. Zoom people aren't seeing that one, I don't think, but okay. So there are some protections here. I mean, you know, I say we need to get that many customers. The business revenues, we talk about these wireless carriers and business and stuff. Any revenue that comes in offsets residential subscriptions that we need. Sometimes when we go to a city, we're like, yeah, there aren't any. West Point, we're like, there's just no businesses there to be had. We have not yet built out this Cottonwood business park over here. It's one of the few major business developments we haven't built to for, I don't know why not, but we haven't. We are going to build out that area, and any revenues we get from those businesses, which we expect to be pretty significant, will offset residential subscriptions. So that's a protection you have. Any of the charge we charge the city directly, 100% of those dollars goes to offset residential. You just divide that number by 30, and that's how many residential customers we don't need to. So this is really designed that we never have to make that phone call and say you have to pay us. But this is a partnership between you and other cities, right? And those cities are like, what do we, they took some years of being underwater and some pain, and now things are going well.
Those 11 cities really ate a lot of
Yeah,
trouble.
it was expensive for them.
Do you guys do customer service surveys, customer satisfaction surveys that could be made available if you do, or?
We do a survey here. Let's see. Oh, maybe I have that slide hidden. We do have this net promoter score here. We do a survey every year and ask people, how likely are you to recommend your service to others? It's a positive 63, which is the best in the state. So we check that. We address concerns. We have the top Google rating score in Utah, even better than Google Fiber. We'd like to rub that in a little bit. So if you're asking end users, do they like this?
Yeah.
Yes. There's a video I often will share, but we're probably over time, but it's a reference from other cities where not only do the residents like this, but the city managers, the mayors, they're just like, this is one of the best things we've done for our community. And there's a slide that kind of talks a little bit about that of, if I came in here and said, hey, that $27 million project, you should just pay for it. I mean, I'm not asking you to do that, but if you had $27 million to invest in something, there's not a better use of that. Like, it would be worth a $27 million subsidy, because you would be reducing the average cost of services in your city by $27, whether they sign up or not. That's the competitive impact of bringing in a new fiber offering with open access and choice. Your property values go up by like 3.1%. You may not want that because everything's so high right now, but statistically, that's generally been a good thing. You protect net neutrality, quality of life improvements, all these good benefits come. And I'd say that no other municipal project can so quickly and so dramatically bring a benefit like that to your residents and businesses as an investment in a fiber infrastructure, and that it would be worth a $27 million investment if that's what it took. But the beauty of this is people are willing to pay the amount of money that it takes for the residents to voluntarily pay for that investment. So you end up getting a $27 million investment in your city. And some people are like, well, wait a second, isn't it utopias and isn't it not the cities? Well, we kind of are you. And I mean, we're an interlocal entity. We treat it like it's yours, even though we do own all of these networks collectively within the UIA, the phase 2 entity, with a couple of exceptions. Usually those exceptions have been when the cities did have a bunch of money they wanted to throw at it. That would be a reason to carve it out. But if we're financing it, there's a lot of benefits in having us finance it.
So sorry, one last question from me. So
Yep.
your target's 4,743 households, which is a break even. Is that
Yep.
what that number is? So let's say you get up to 6,000. Does that increase the speed in which the system gets paid, or that the bond gets paid off, which means
That was what I was gonna say.
Sort of.
term lowers?
What
So-
happens to if it's all rosy?
Yeah, exactly.
So what happens is it's good. You guarantee this phase, which basically builds out the system and connects. In your case, it'd be the 33%, not the 40%. But then when we go add another 1,000 subscriptions, that's 1,000 installations that weren't financed and weren't bonded for. And so we actually go underwater in the short term. In the long term, you're like, well, but there's no more revenue. So what happens is we go and finance that $1 million plus without any guarantee from the city. We pay for that. And we do other financings that are kind of general purpose financings. But then we get revenue from those, which is great. And we use that revenue to pay off that additional debt that we take on with no guarantee from the city. And then we say, okay, well, then at the end of that period, we'll have an upside. It's like, yeah, but but then somebody built a bunch of new homes, and then a bunch more people signed up. So it kind of becomes an ongoing
The
cycle.
bond covers getting to your target then.
Yes. If there's excess revenue, it's also comes at the excess cost. And so it's kind of a wash. Residential is kind of modeled as a break even. Businesses can be very profitable. If Utopia and UIA at the end of the day finds itself in a position where we're paying these bonds and there's lots of excess cash coming off the top, it's our intention to pay off debt early and lower the cost of services and reinvest back into the cities for smart city applications and other things like that. But when and how and what those happen and when, it's kind of like, let's see where we're at in a few years. So there is enormous potential benefit to the city, but it's like if some competitive option came in and we need to lower the cost, that might be the priority. If we don't have that and we could pay off bonds early, we'd love to. If we pay off the bond early, you're off the hook. So I mean,
That was my other question.
I was gonna ask,
Yeah.
in the $30 portion of it that you charge, who's in charge of setting that? Is that the board?
To some extent, yes. I mean, we've always just kind of,
I mean, it's been there,
Done
but
that.
at some point it's realistic to expect that it may have to change.
we have, well, no. If we sign the deal and finance your project, it will always be $30 till the end of that term. If we do another project that's more expensive, say 5 years from now, or we do Alpine, we are considering a $40 a month fee for Alpine because their cost of the build is and the financing corresponding to that is higher, but that's specific to their project. So yours, we would keep with the $30 because it works. It's kind of the right balance of pricing in that. But again, if interest rates skyrocketed and we said, we could still, I'd say we'd rather go up to 40% take rate risk and still be comfortable. But if we found ourselves in a 50 to 60% take rate risk, and the way to resolve that would be to go from 30 to 35 at the time of financing is when we'd make the decision. That's an option. Fortunately, we don't need to here.
And the corporate centers, will that get us to that threshold quicker?
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, if we get $30,000 a month in business revenue, whether it's from cell towers, schools, businesses, or whatever, half of that we need for our operating and construction installations, all that, but half of that offsets residential. So 15,000 divided by 30 is some number I can't do in my head, but that's how many residential customers you wouldn't need, and we would hit the revenue target. So I would expect we actually hit the revenue target and we all breathe easier, probably closer to like 30% take rate, because we'll have that offset from businesses.
Well, Roger, thank you. We're about out of time, but this was highly beneficial, I think, for the council, and you did a great job. And like I said, full disclosure, we want to hear from competitors too, just so we make a good informed decision. But thank you for your time and for coming, and I think we're all really grateful for you. So thank you. Okay, next on our item, let's move a little bit quickly, is a discussion on-street permit parking code that we're going to have our Community and Economic Development Director, Mike Johnson, lead the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. So this was something that was discussed in the council retreat that we wanted to bring to you for input. There we go. We've had a couple right at the beginning of this newest council term of permit parking petitions that have been submitted, and I know that the council has expressed some concerns. The police department as well has expressed some concerns over the whole concept of allowing certain individuals or residents to park on public streets and not others from an equity perspective. I do want to clarify that the discussion tonight does not, this ordinance isn't the same ordinance that allows the city to establish no parking anytime or only parking between these hours. This is just the permit parking ordinance, the resident petition process that we've seen recently. So just some background, and feel free to interrupt and jump in and ask questions at any time. But this is 11.22 of the city code. Again, interest was expressed by the council at the 2022 retreat in amending this or repealing it. And that's kind of what we're here tonight, is for feedback on the extent that we should look at this and make changes.
So we have some permit parking currently. Would they be
We do.
grandfathered in?
Yeah, so how I would view this is any changes we make, what we should leave in is the administration of current established areas. Those were established under a legitimate process following the code, so we can continue to administer those. So you leave that language in, but you provide language earlier in the ordinance that basically prohibits them moving forward. But again, I'll just give an overview and then I'll kind of turn it over to the council in terms of how you'd like to see us proceed with this. This is the stated purpose in the ordinance, which I think some will find problematic based on prior feedback, but it says right in there, the purpose of the ordinance is to provide preferential treatment when competing with commuter vehicles for on-street parking in residential neighborhoods of the city. So that is how this code was looked at and established originally. The authority, as you are aware, is the council has the authority to designate permit parking areas. I believe the council has authority to initiate the creation of one, but it also allows residents to submit a petition. So it's kind of twofold. Residents can organize and submit a compliant petition, and the council must consider it, or the council could opt to do it voluntarily. There are certain criteria. Again, as we've been over, this is just all part of the ordinance for when a permit parking area should be recommended or not. And that recommendation role is with the Community and Economic Development Department. So we review these against those 4 criteria and just make a recommendation as objectively as possible. But basically it's, hey, is there an area of the city where there's a disproportionate amount of commuter vehicle parking, which is parking that doesn't originate from that area. And if an area meets those criteria, or it can be demonstrated that it meets those criteria, then we would recommend supporting that petition. The process then to get a petition in front of the council is a pre-application meeting with me, petition signed by 51% of the affected residents, and a public hearing, and then required council action within 30 days of that hearing. So even though a petition may not meet those criteria, that's not what's needed to get it in front of the council. It's just a complete petition that has 51% signatures, and it gets in front of the council and goes to public hearing and action 30 days later. The rest of the ordinance pertains to administration of existing areas, which I would propose we can add some language in there to clarify the intent, but I would propose we leave generally as is. Some of that involves the council's authority to go into existing areas and amend them or expand them or even revoke them. It establishes a process for how to do that. It deals with some of the logistics like issuing permits and how many guest permits each resident is issued and what's allowed in those zones. And then it gets into enforcement and penalties. So our question before we prepare an actual amended ordinance is whether the council is interested in just outright repealing the authority to even create a permit parking area, or if the council would like to see the petition process eliminated, so it's just a council eligible type of thing, or if there's something else you have in mind.
And do you have a recommendation? Is your recommendation to repeal this?
Well, there is authority in here. I think it depends on the council's perspective on this. We've done some legal review of this. The idea of creating an area like this on a public street seems to withstand legal challenges. You see it in big metropolitan areas a lot, and big cities. But it's just what the council's philosophy is on the use of public streets, and should that be restricted or not.
We have 2 currently. Different areas?
There's technically 3, but 2 of them, it was one area, and then the second one expanded it. And then, and that's up by Ferguson Canyon.
Yeah.
That neighborhood up there. And then the other one is on Canyon Center Parkway, just a small stretch along right by the residential neighborhood that's within Canyon Center. And then the one on Racket Club Drive that was denied.
We've had other requests. We had a request to do fairly good section just east of the rec center. That was the initial proposal. It came in, we need to do this, we need to do this. We solved that with a different solution by just saying the same rules for everybody. Basically, it was summertime between these 2 hours, you can't park it. It's not dissimilar to what is in force across the street and in the nearby neighborhoods of the school. You can park here unless school's in session. It's between 7 and 4. School's in, there's no park. There's no school, you're welcome to park. But it was to everyone.
Yeah.
May I add something
Yeah.
to that? So one of the big issues, and we've seen this happen, is when you create these, oftentimes it'll push parking further into other areas, and then we'll get applications from other areas adjacent to the ones that were approved. And so there's a lot of unintended consequences that occur with this. I know Chief Russo has had concerns with this from the public street perspective, and you can share that. But so there are a lot of unintended consequences that prompts us to bring this to you to really see what you want to do with the direction. I mean, there are some residents that may want to see this retained, but those unintended consequences have caused a lot of problem administratively, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I see we've got a couple issues. We could continue to look at this as a one-off issue. We get to make the decision and say, this one, to be honest with you, makes sense. Or we pass the ordinance and say that this resolution says it doesn't,
I guess if
we don't even want to even consider it. right?
Yeah, where we would recommend to staff is if you want to see this change made, which was expressed, either full repeal, so not even the council has authority to create these areas, or just repealing the ability for any resident group, as long as they have 51% of signatures to get this in front of you for action.
So let me get opinions, Councilmember Burrell, Newell, and Peterson and Brecken. Let's see what your thoughts are.
Thank you. As a council, I would like to encourage us to think of where we want the city to go. Do we want to become a place where there's this, permitting given, which, I don't see as, I see it as more of a Band-Aid effect. I'd like the council over time to be thinking about how do we have, frankly, fewer cars on our roads. Why are these people coming to park? They're coming to park at trailheads. As we develop our Fort Union Boulevard, I'd like to see more shuttles, a more vibrant city where people feel comfortable walking, riding their e-bikes, riding their regular bicycles, taking shuttles, that when people come to visit, we don't have such a preponderance of cars flooding in. I've lived where there is a heavy tourist season every summer. And frankly, when I was younger, I lived where at certain times I had to park blocks away from the apartment that I lived in. And so I guess what I'm getting to is that I would favor either repealing or looking for other avenues. Another thing to consider, depending where the affected areas are, there can be metering, which could be revenue for the city and discourage people from driving, in that are commuters, that are classified as commuters. So since this is based on addressing people coming in that are not residents and parking where the residents want and need, again, doing things to discourage that and encourage, again, active transportation and transit and shuttles.
Thank you.
I get concerned, like Tim was saying, about some of these collateral impacts from permitting. And these are public streets. And we have to consider that. I think having a process for people to submit their concerns is great. We always need to allow for that, for our residents to be able to address their concerns. But I'm more in tune to having the period type parking available for certain periods of time for people. We can't meter the residential streets. That would be something that,
And I did say only certain, it might apply to certain places.
But I think for the most part, if we allow too many of these permits to take place, we're going to see other issues start to develop, and then everybody's going to want permits in their neighborhood, and then there'll be no parking for anybody. We'll have to helicopter into our driveways. So it's, for me, Yeah, he hired an electric helicopter. But it's a drone's not gonna pick me up. So.
Technology.
So it's a tough, it's kind of
Another really
a
good
tough
point.
decision because, you know, we want to have people that have that, to be able to address their concerns, and we can discuss other ways to mitigate the concerns that they have. But, so I'm in favor of having some semblance of a process to allow people to address their concerns, but I can't go with this, you know, free. But I also would like the grandfathering to stay in place. That's something that we have to agree on.
Doug, Councilor Peterson.
I think every one of us have driven down a street and have people parking on both sides. And it's a scary situation. There are a couple of reasons. If anybody comes out from behind a car, you don't have any time lag between putting on your brakes, children and adults. I think that we've tried to mitigate some of this problem once for the trailhead of Ferguson. And hopefully we can keep people off because we know what those streets are like when people are parked on both sides. It's a scary situation. The question is, we have events, snow days, and we have Ferguson it's a summertime situation, then we've got the wintertime situation. And I think going back to development, when that one project across from Canyon Center never had enough parking, number one, never had enough parking for other than just the people that live there. Let's face it, we like to gather and we want to join with our friends. If you don't have any place to park, then what's the issue? I mean, the issue, we're trying to fix a problem that could have those unintended consequences that Tim mentioned. So I think we have to be careful that we don't have a snowball effect on this situation because we could.
Scott, anything from you or anything more?
There are other places that have asked that, you know, too many cars parked on both sides or too much. To me, that answer to those residents would be, okay, we'll just sign off half the street is no park, one side.
Yeah.
And then you've got no parking on one side of the street. Then the tough one is, well, is it my side or your side that gets eliminated? You know, it's the same thing as if you're putting anything down the street in front of houses.
Yeah.
What happens to your thing? I would probably lean, I think we have been creative in finding other solutions that I think are a little more equitable. And so I would probably say, let's write it out so that when I was wondering if maybe the appeal process to change those things in a neighborhood could be tied into the traffic calming manual, because it gets to kind of be the same issue. What's happening with cars in our neighborhood?
Yeah.
And that might be a way to keep the avenues open, but in a little bit different thought of just no one can park in front of my house, but me and my friends.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in favor of moving ahead with the resolution at least, so we'll vote on it here in the business meeting.
This is just work session. We'll prepare.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll prepare an actual draft. So I'm hearing though, we'll keep administration.
What Mike was saying was you need to work fast.
Yeah, I guess. It sounds like the council's in favor of a some sort of approach to dealing with parking issues, but maybe not the approach of just let certain people park here and not others, a more blanket, fair approach. So we can build some language in.
So
There may be
you got an hour. so
elsewhere. Yeah.
we'll-
But the plan will be to repeal this whole petition process, and we'll just leave administration of existing areas in there so we
But
can.
I think future, but is that okay? Maybe we stick that as possibly looking at a review of the traffic calming.
Yeah.
We have a nice manual. It works but it was geared slightly different, but I think this could marry into accomplishing some of the solutions we need.
Well, no, thank you. Great discussion. Thank you, Mike. I
Yeah, thanks.
appreciate your input, and Tim, everybody. So let's move on. We're gonna just do a review quickly.
I think, were we gonna talk, you see, more about the traffic study contract? I don't know if we.
Did we skip that?
Yeah, I've got it here.
Okay, yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
So this was in your council packet, but this is a proposed contract amendment with Horrocks Engineering. Again, this comes from the council retreat. of a desire to do a city-initiated comprehensive traffic analysis of the Canyon Center area. And I say area, it expands west to the neighborhood around it, onto Fort Union and even onto Wasatch in that area. The proposal here, because we have Horrocks Engineering already doing our transportation master plan, which we'll talk about at one of our next meetings, to just add this as part of that contract. So they do this detailed traffic study as well. This is summarized from the scope, which was in the packet in its entirety, but it's a pretty detailed analysis where they will go and review existing documentation, both master plans, EIS data, project-specific traffic studies that have been done already. They'll analyze all those as background. Then they'll go out and do their technical data collection, traffic counts, turn movements, that kind of thing. The idea there, and weather pending, is they'll do daily and peak hour counts, as well as some 24-hour counts on busy streets. And then they'll fly drones out during powder days and observe traffic patterns during big ski days as well. And then additional parking observation in commercial areas. So your racket clubs, your canyon centers. They'll use this data to do a full traffic impact study, which is a technical engineering study that Matt can answer questions on if you have them. But then in addition to that, they'll look at traffic circulation in the area, which way are cars going, and how do we get cars to go where we want them to go. Basically, we don't want commercial vehicles spilling out in west into the neighborhood, into your nut trees and your reindeer drives and those areas. So what can we do or recommend as a city to make sure cars are flowing properly where they should be? This scope would also include multiple meetings between the consultant and the council. So you could provide updates and feedback and direction and make recommendations as they do the study.
Have they given some type of analysis for how long it would take?
I don't know that that's in there.
I think it's
I-
about a 4-month study to get through.
Well, and
Because they won't be able to do,
No, they
powder
won't- they
days
won't
and
hit
skiing,
powder days on
really.
this one unless we just push
Okay.
it off.
Well, let me, because I just had a thought. Isn't the historical data we're getting from the, I don't know what to call it, was the adaptive traffic? That's not what it is. Wouldn't that have counts that we go back on your snow days and get a rough idea of what the,
That can give some
Numbers are-
information. It's not built
start with,
for
yeah.
traffic study data, but it can give some basis.
but it'd
or
give you at least a,
give you a higher elevation. view.
yeah.
Well, if I may
go
chime
ahead.
in here, since this is my district, I'm very clear on what the residents are extremely displeased about and very concerned about the danger and a number of things. And this is very much tied to peak ski season, the powder days and the holidays. And so I noticed that the study was based on that the Horowitz, whatever the contract is completed by December 28th of this year. And so my point is that the days where it's been highly impactful, do you mind bringing the map back up if you wouldn't mind, Mike?
Yep.
So for everybody who hasn't seen the videos that were taken recently, cars back up, as we all know, on Wasatch Boulevard, sometimes all the way to the I-215. They're in complete gridlock, but also along Fort Union, it can back up, clear up into this area along here. So this study really needs to focus on the peak time. And by December 28th, we may or may not have had one of those days. They tend to occur in January, February, and March. So we're already kind of too late to monitor it for this year. And I think that the study needs to do its focus in that January, February, March timeframe. And I guess it would have to be, it seems to me it would have to be in 2023. The other thing that I'm concerned about is that what are we thinking? I mean, that when the big Cottonwood Canyon gravel pit area gets developed in another, who knows, 8 or 10 years or whenever that starts to happen. There's that projection out in the future, but there's also the fact that the office buildings have not been completed in the Canyon Center. So when they're occupied, when the hotel is running at highest occupancy, which again will likely be at the holidays of Christmas time into January, February, March, that adds cars into the area. So again, my big concern about that contract is that it needs to be based on likely that peak time and projecting what it's going to look like when, again, the hotel, the office space, all of this is fully occupied. Because what's happening now, I mean, I realize that we're trying to build and plan for the future. But I just want to make sure that that's the big emphasis of this traffic
No,
study, you know, I mean.
I think those are really good points. But, sorry, Tim, you can go ahead. I was gonna.
Well, maybe Matt was gonna, one of the things I would suggest is we move forward with this, with the agreement tonight, and then we can have a conversation about a potential addendum to address that.
We
Is that
we
what you
can
were
look
doing?
at addressing that, but just so when you do the traffic studies and the traffic modelings and the reports, we take into account building, types. So we know it's a 5-story, so many, whatever the thing is for the building, there is traffic data, like volumes of traffic data that's used for these studies. So that's why you can do these studies without an actual building being in place as you do these things, okay? So to wait for every individual and specific building to come in and then go out and sit and look and do actual counts is, your study will never get completed. It will just continue to evolve, right? So there's a thought. I mean, we can trap, those are doable through methods that have been developed over time, modeling. When you talk about snow days or powder days, the thing that you need to be, let's be aware here as well, that's not a peak. That is an anomaly, if you will. So it's like when you do a storm drain system, you don't design for a 1,000-year event. If you were to do that, you would have, 30-foot size pipes under your road. You design for a certain event, and then you build for that, knowing that there's going to be some pinch points in the system. That's just the way it is. You can't afford to do certain things. So when you talk about snow days and using snow days, a particular day as your event to design your roads, you're going to be designing your roads for a backup that occurs one day out of the month, if you will, I guess, or I'm just throwing a number out, occurs during that one snow day out of the month of December, or 3 days out of the month in December, but you still have, 362 days out of the year that everything's functioning. So we have to be aware of that and be cognizant of that as we go through this. So I just wanted to bring that forward.
So those are great points. Thanks, Matt. Most important to me is that we get the gravel pit and the department and the commercial building that aren't built included. And as long as you say that we can do some type of simulation to include those, that would be really great.
That will be in the simulation. If you remember this, the precipitous of this was there was an application at one point for change of use in there, and it kind of raised a few things. And so the council during your retreat said, let's take a closer look. Because the original developer did these things, they followed what they were required at the time. We decided as a city to come in and put our own fingers in this and make this more detailed and get more, let's really drill down on this thing. So yes, we've talked to them about the pit, the parking. Mike went so far as to say we got to put the EIS in there, and the build out of the Canyon Center, and then do a spread out, 3/4 of a mile or so, everything surrounding this area, and taking that into account. So yes, that is in here. And we can, like I said, we'll sit down with the contract and just say, look, these are some concerns that were brought up tonight. What can we do to either extend the extend this. Anything we add to it is going to extend it. So the time will obviously.
you're-
stretch
I
it.
actually, oh, sorry.
Just one more point of clarification. Do you see that this could be perhaps a road design issue when the folks from the Apple Valley area here, are complaining about not being able to get in and out of their street?
Yes.
A possible, we've definitely talked about signage and
Yeah.
things like that, but perhaps even some way to help with a lane that says locals only or something that comes along this far south side of the road that allows local residents to get in and out of their neighborhoods, but keeps those folks that are trying to get to Big or Little Cotton Canyon for skiing in a lineup. Maybe their lineup will be longer, but I don't know, is that a
Yeah, no,
possibility?
you are
over
making,
time?
no, that is, the result of this would be recommendations for traffic circulation, because if you recall, the app, we've just discussed, the parking applications, those things, there's been some concerns about those. There's been concern about, people parking on the street during snow days, because it's a shortcut, and there's concerns about, Waze or Google Maps telling you to go around during certain times. So going in there, perhaps this could be a recommendation of traffic signals at a certain location, blocking. We're talking outside of the box here, blocking certain roads so that there aren't these cut throughs that you're forced to stay out there unless you're local. And then as these apps that tell you where to go, learn you can't go that way, quit sending this volumes of traffic through there.
Yeah.
So yes, to answer your question,
Great.
short question, yes.
Great.
So I think the data that we
Went a long way
can get,
around for that, didn't I?
I don't think we want to wait to start getting data. So I would maybe propose that we approve the contract and get the process started. And I actually really like the thought of perhaps them coming back with an addendum to this project to include snow days next spring, outside of the scope of this, but because we're not going to get that data, and I don't think we want to wait a year to get started.
I think we get a rough idea
Yeah.
from things that are out there. UDOT counts stuff going up and down Wasatch constantly.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be precise, but it's gonna give us a comparison between regular and those other days.
Yeah.
We've got to be, I think anytime you're dealing with traffic, and I'm just gonna put this, because this, I've heard a couple, there's a contrary thing. If we're going to say everyone uses the public road, uses the public road for parking, it probably also applies to driving. So I heard there was a little bit of contradictory there, but I mean, I certainly understand it, and I'm gonna be sitting over here where I'm gonna be screaming and yelling when they shut off my road this summer, which I hope they don't do, but I haven't seen the traffic plan yet. And then the other real concern that I saw just having some conversations with you is if we do design it to be wonderful on snow days, what you're going to have is the other 362 days a year where things are, it's like it's fast because that capacity, it's like the 30-foot pipe instead of what's under there now. Everything can move. It's like you're designing up at the U for the football day.
Right.
All of a sudden you have 40,000 people are going to use this in a couple of hours.
Well, if I may just
You gotta
clarify, I
balance
am
it.
not advocating for wider, more lanes, fast, big art. I'm advocating for the design of the road to accommodate the resident needs. And I mean, there's many things that need to be done that will require UDOT and ETA and the city. I mean, this is a bit much bigger than, but I just don't, if we're paying to do this traffic study, I just want to make sure that it is really comprehensively analyzing the, how heavy hit these neighborhoods are on those days, as well as generally the build out of the Canyon Center development.
So you don't want wider, bigger Wasatch?
I'm just
Gee, have you ever heard that? From a megaphone?
You've got to be really careful and at least how we're looking at that, because that could be, well, I don't want to have any, you know, it's like, I don't want anybody speeding down my street. Okay, fine, but when you go to actually go to design that, you've got to go it down pretty strict and slow things, parking on both sides, really narrow stuff that the other 85, 95, 90% of the people just don't want to deal. That was my point. So it has to be accurate, and
Yes.
and when you're doing a comprehensive like this, things can get.
But I think
messed.
whatever we have to do, we have to make sure that it's going to take time for whatever happens there happen. We're going to have another ski season before we know it. And so that cut through where everybody thinks that it's going to take them and then they can't get out, that blocks that whole, all those neighborhoods going all the way south.
Yes.
And then they can't get out. So I think we've got to do some short-term planning and of course for the down the road planning, because it takes time to get things done.
Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate those great comments. We're a little bit tight on time, so we're going to move to item number 5, which is our review of calendars and upcoming events. First off, we have a bunny hop. None of us want to miss. I expect us all to do the search for the Easter bunny on the city's website. Starts April 11th.
Sounds like it's a virtual. do
Yeah,
it
this
on
is
your own
virtual.
thing.
So yep, April 11th through the 15th after 9 a.m. The physical one is the Easter egg hunt on Saturday, April 16th at Butler Park, starting at 9:30. Let all your residents know. And
I
then
got a request from the police. They're doing that's a shakeout as well, isn't it?
the 16th, I thought it was the 23rd. Is the shakeout
I thought it was
we know?
23rd.
I think it's the 23rd.
I think it's 23rd as well.
Are they doing, is CERT doing something else earlier on the 16th then? Maybe I have my days right. I better talk. to Paul.
I'll text Paul and find out.
And then the last item is our Butlerville Days, the 28th to 30th. Volunteers and sponsors needed. Please contact Ann Etchell. Okay, now we do have, our last item is we do have a closed meeting tonight. So we do have some items to discuss, which include a property acquisition. So at this point, I would entertain the motion to
Cover that in 15 or 20 minutes.
adjourn, well, we have
I
till
guess we don't have
6:30, yep, so to adjourn our work session and to enter into a closed session.
I move to adjourn our work session and move into a closed session.
For the purpose of.
For the
For the
purpose
of
of property acquisition.
property acquisition. I didn't get it right.
Nice
Can
second.
we have a second? So we have a movement
Boy,
from
that's
Councilor
another
Renewal, a second from Councilor Peterson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, we